Dr. Osae-Kwapong, what's your view of the prediction by the EIU and the local dynamics that we bring to the discussion from the poll that was done by the Global Info Analytics?
Thank you, Samson. Good morning. Good morning, Professor Jampo. So on the EIU report, I follow the work of EIU particularly because I'm very interested in their democracy index. So that's my familiarity with them. If you follow how our elections have played out in the Fourth Republic, right, we seem to have been on this eight-year cycle. They make that baseline prediction on the back of the fact that there are certain things that make the incumbent unpopular, there are certain governance challenges, and therefore it is their reading that based on that, the NDC stands a very good chance of winning the 2024 election. I think if we put it within the context of some of the conversations we've had here and some of the ongoing political conversations in public spaces and the policy challenges, some of the issues belaboring this government, and again, within the context of the 8-year cycle, I think most people would be more inclined to say, we are going to go back to this 8-year rotation again, and the NDC stands a chance of winning 2024. I am still a little curious, as I said this week, as to what informed the other line they threw in, right? They say, NDC stands a reasonable chance of winning. But I'm just curious as to the basis for that extra sentence they threw in there, which was, we expect them to revitalize their chances with a fresh candidate. I don't know what is informing that. Now, on the back of the 2016 election, I had a number of private conversations with friends and colleagues in which I said, if you look at the election results from 2016, both presidential and parliamentary, then for a party like NDC, I was saying to myself, well, maybe come 2020, they may want new national party executives and then a new candidate, give it a fresh look as they go into 2020. But since then, I have a different take on it. If you look at the outcome of the 2020 election, right, and if you look at how former President John Mahama performed in 2016 compared to 2020, I don't, and as I said this week, I don't think I share the view that they need to revitalize, whatever they mean by revitalize their prospects with a fresh candidate. I honestly do not by the proposition that he's not a viable candidate, not based on how he performed in the 2020 election. Yes, he may have fallen short of ultimate victory, but I just don't. And I wish I knew the assumptions that went into why the EIU threw in that sentence. But that, for me, is still my initial reaction to the report. He faced a much. If you look at the incumbent in 2016, based on some of the surveys and polls that I looked at, he faced a much difficult political terrain going into election 2016 compared to President Nana Akufo-Addo. If you look at the political terrain based on the polls and surveys going into the 2020 election. But 2024 is a very different position. And again, my position is that I just don't buy the argument that former President John Mahama is not a viable candidate. The Global Info Analytics survey, as Professor Jampo said, is who did they actually poll, right? If they polled regular voters within the regions, then yes, that is the preference of who they would like to lead each of our two major political parties. But when it comes to the presidential primaries, it's the party delegates who make the ultimate choice. So it will be very interesting if it were possible to poll the party delegates today and regularly until the party primaries are done, to see where the party delegates are thinking in terms of who they would like to their party to be led by. From every indication, it looks like, or should I say, I wouldn't be surprised if former President John Mahama emerges as the candidate for the NDC to lead them in 2024. If you look at some of the key voices in the party, he seems to be the preferred candidate for the party establishment. And so I wouldn't be surprised if he's able to beat back any competition that emerges for him to lead the party. On what the Global Info Analytics said about the MPP race, in terms of Vice President Dr. Bawumia leading at one point, and now the lead has shifted to Mr. Alan Kyerematen. Again, if this were coming from the party delegates, that would be quite an interesting shift. But it would be very interesting to see how that primary plays out. I have a bias for establishment candidates. So that is why, for example, on the NDC side, I would prefer to keep former President John Mahama. And on the MPP side, again, because of my preference for establishment candidates and the investments they make in the party, win or lose, that is why I would see the delegates preferring and choosing the current vice president. But we still have quite a ways to go between now and the party primaries, as well as the general elections in 2024.
All right, but unlike Professor Gyampo, you don't question the credibility of the EIU report prediction?
No, not at all. And as I explained, I've followed their work for quite a number of years now. I use their democracy index a lot in the work that I do. So I won't be dismissive of them as an organization, even though I have some questions about the basis that informed that one line that they threw in their election 2024 watch. Because they used that sentence in February 2021, and they still use that in March and April of 2022. And I'm very curious as to what assumptions is informing why they're saying that.
But do they have proper basis for the prediction they make?
If they had shared what those bases were, then it would be much easier to vouch for them, right? Something must have informed why they said that. If we knew that, then we could either defend them or we could discount some of those bases. If they had said that right after the 2016 election or early 2017, I would have been more inclined to support that assertion because of how election 2016 turned out for former President John Mahama. But 4 or 5 years later, in 2022, it's not an assertion that I would lend support to.
They say that their baseline forecast is that ongoing public dissatisfaction with the slow pace of improvement in governance, such as infrastructure development, job creation, and easing of corruption, will trigger anti-incumbency factors and push the electorate to seek a change, unquote. Does it take any specialty to say this?
No, not necessarily, right? Any keen observer of the political space and political happenings in Ghana would pick up on some of these signals, and based on those signals, would be able to say this spells doom for the incumbent, and this raises very bright prospects for the main opposition party, especially because we also go through this 8-year cycle, right? But a number of things that between now and 2024, for me, beyond some of the policy decisions that the incumbent government would make and the impact of that, there are a number of things that I will be looking out for from the public opinion side, which is the next Afrobarometer survey, the next survey that will come out from the Department of Political Science at the University of Ghana. But then I will also be looking for the National Commission for Civic Education matters of concern to the Ghanaian voter, which would come out, during the election year, because there are some questions in there that gives you some really strong signals of what potentially the election outcome.
In some 30 seconds before we go for our next break and then bring on Dr. John Kuma, what do you say to YK Ansayeboa, who says that, don't you think it is too early to be giving audience to any polls in 2022 for election 2024 when a lot of things can happen in politics in 2 years? So he agrees with Professor Jampo. He says, I believe there are a lot of pressing issues that we should be focusing on at this time, including political party funding, and not give traction to these polls or predictions at this time.
Thompson, I agree, right? But we also say that the next election begins on the very day that the last election is declared. So we have 2 years to go. That I don't dispute. But between now and when election 2024 happens, there would be quite a number of things that would keep popping up and rearing up in our political spaces. We can't totally ignore them, right? But at least you have to keep asking yourself, well, what signals are these early polls pointing to us? And I'm sure there will be more to come in 2023, 2024. But it's one of those, well, what are the early signals saying? And we can't completely ignore any early signals we get, even as we acknowledge the fact that 2 years is a long time to go.
Yeah, but the same question I ask Professor Jampo, who believes that this is the way we should be treating these things at this time. The same question I ask him, I ask you. Today, looking at our circumstances and how the NPP has run the affairs so far, from where you sit, does the NDC not stand a better chance today?
Yes, if the elections were held today, given my reading of all of the challenges that the incumbent is facing, yes. I think the NDC has very, very good prospects if the election were held today.
We'll take a break here. We'll be right back.